was driving up. I was halfway, and it hit me, and I thought, "Oh my God, I'm never going to play for Liverpool again. I'm never going to be a Liverpool player because I absolutely love the club." I'll be honest. I think if we'd have kept him fit for a longer period in that season, I think we would have stayed up, or at least had a much better chance. Stadiums are huge. Fans fill it. There's 50,000, 60,000. The rivalries are horrendous. There's violence before games.
This was not meant to happen. This could not happen. This is happening.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back for another very special edition of The Coach's Son Parks the Bus. It's been a long break over Christmas and New Year's, but we're very glad to be back with a very special guest. Today, we've got former Premier League superstar Danny Guthrie joining us today. Danny, thank you for joining.
No, pleasure. Can't wait to get started.
Absolutely. So at the start of the podcast, what we'd like to do is just dive into a bit about your history and how football came into your life. How did the road to football come to you?
Well, I actually never had anyone in my family that played football. My parents didn't. They weren't really big fans, but obviously the usual story. When I was probably 5, 6, just started playing, around the streets where I was living, and there was a good number of lads, mainly older boys. You know, we'd play every day after school, and just started from there really. And I think once you start, once you realise you're good at something, I think you enjoy it a little bit more. So there was obviously something natural there, and I think when you're good at it, you enjoy it more. So it just started from there, and then you go on through the levels, joining your local Sunday league grassroots teams, and all of a sudden, you become obsessed with the sport. And then I was obviously watching it a lot and collecting stickers and books, then playing in school and outside of school, and all of a sudden it's your life, and then it's just about progressing through the levels. Yeah,
absolutely. Who was your favourite player growing up? Did you collect any good stickers of him?
I think the first player I can remember thinking wow was probably David Beckham when I was young, just because the goals, he was quite iconic and stylish, and he was always in the media, so he's the first one you see when I was growing up. And then obviously he had the class to go with it, and the free kicks I used to look for, so I practiced the free kicks and stuff like that. Then I actually had the hair, the curtain. I think Beckham was the first one I looked at and went, yeah, I'm having some of him, yeah.
It's interesting because he was a global star before even social media came around, especially in football terms. He was a rock star. Just want to touch on your coming through the ranks, through the academy. 2002, you're 16 years old. You joined Liverpool's academy, previously being at Manchester United. Obviously, massive rivalry there. How does it come about? How do you leave one academy and join another? Did they scout you, or was it your personal choice to leave?
So it goes back way further. I mean, I was playing grassroots, maybe under 7s, under 8s. I actually went to Aston Villa first because that was from the area I'm from. Villa's probably the biggest club in the Midlands. So I was at Aston Villa for a year, but at that age, you're not signed. You're going in there training, and then you're playing with your grassroots team on the weekends. While I was at Aston Villa, Man United had asked me to come and train, so I was going there for a year in training, or maybe 2 years during school holidays and stuff like that. I think in England, I don't know if it's a bit more relaxed now, but the rule was you couldn't travel more than an hour and a half from your house to sign for a club. So Birmingham to Manchester, it's probably on that cusp of that time. So I was going to Man United, I was training, and then Liverpool came along around when I was 12, 13. And it was just a case of they had offered me a contract. Man United hadn't. Liverpool's academy at the time was fantastic. They were having a great resurgence of young players coming through, with obviously Michael Owen, then Gerrard and Carragher were coming through at that time and in the first team. So it was no problem for me to join Liverpool from there. Now, obviously, while I was at Man United, I was playing in games against Liverpool. And so when I turned up in Liverpool Even at 12 years old, it was very, very difficult to integrate into the dressing room because they obviously had played against me at Man United. So it was a difficult transition. But I loved Liverpool instantly, and the facilities, the coaches were brilliant. And then from there, I'm traveling 3 times a week for training during the week and playing on the weekend. So that it was a huge commitment to my parents because obviously I would finish school and then I'd literally jump in the car from school in my uniform, get changed in the car, eat my dinner in the car, drive an hour and a half. And in England, the M6 motorway is notorious for traffic, so you get caught in that. Then I'd get back home after training around 11, 12 at night, and then just repeat. So it was a huge commitment by my parents, and also just as a kid, you're just doing it. You don't even think, like me jumping in the car in a uniform, getting changed and eating my dinner in the back was like, yeah, so what? But I think back now and you think, Jesus, it was like, it's a big, it's a huge thing. And I always think, because I've got a son as well, how convenient was it for him? Would it be for him to do it? Would I let him do it? And it was a massive risk. But then, from that, you just progress through the age groups of 12s, 13s, 14s, and then you're hoping when you get to under 15 that you get offered a scholarship. And then 16 is obviously where you go full time. And fortunately, I did.
You mentioned obviously the rivalry between Manchester and Liverpool. Even at a youth level, at a young level, is that friction still exists at a younger level as it does with the?
Yeah. Listen, it was difficult, and there was times where I thought, like, nobody liked me in the dressing room, even at that age, because I'd been at Man United, and it was tough, but it was great to come through because even at that age, you're building character and you're breaking walls down, and all of a sudden, even after 2 years, there was still 1 or 2 in the dressing room that just didn't like me because I'd been there. And then, ironically, you become really good friends with them after a couple of years, and then you grow up with them, and then you turn 16, and all of a sudden you're working with them full time. So it was a huge transition for me. But again, at the time, I think as kids, you're not even looking at that. You're just doing it. You're not thinking anything of it. But you look back and you're, you know what? That's quite difficult to go through. You know what I mean? But because you just want to be a footballer so much, you're doing anything that you have to.
Yeah, just kind of your routines, like your second nature.
Yeah.
Football's the first priority, right? Well, have you made your Premier League debut at 19 years old under Rafa Benitez at Liverpool? How did you find out you're going to obviously make your debut, and what was that like playing in that first Premier League match?
Well, the first Premier League one come after I can't remember what the cup was called at the time because it changed every year. I think the Carabao Cup. It might have been called something different.
It was back then.
Yeah. So I actually
Carabao Cup. Yeah.
I actually come on as a sub first in that cup to make my debut, and then I got my first start a couple of weeks later in the Champions League against Galatasaray, and then I made my first Premier League appearance as a sub. But the debut is obviously first appearance in the cup is. The first time you get on the field as a first team player is amazing. I remember it was all, notoriously the cup competitions, particularly the Carabao, is where young players are going to get a chance because it's obviously big clubs like Liverpool, the first round or second round ties is normally against a lower league team. So the opportunities for young players are there. Yeah, like one of the best days of my life. I just remember, obviously, I'm hoping I get on, and I'm desperate to get on because you don't know if you're going to get on. But even in the warm up, just being on the pitch and it's a real game, and you're warming up with the first team players, the crowds are starting to come in. I was I don't know, my senses were just on fire, and the grass looked greener than ever. The lights were brighter than ever. It was the red seats were redder than ever. And my senses were just heightened. And luckily I got on. I got about half an hour. Did quite well, and then I was already training with the first team for a while at that point. So, as long as there weren't no disasters in the games, I was going to get a couple of opportunities.
What were you like when you were a bit younger, 18, 19? Were you arrogant? Were you confident? Or were you kind of the shyer type?
I was quiet. Yeah, I was really shy, and for the first couple of weeks, and it took me a couple of weeks just to get used to being around everyone, sort of like personality-wise. Only because I think the only thing I would say about Liverpool at the time was the academy setup was a separate building to the first team building. So Liverpool's academy was in one area. Liverpool's first team training, Melwood, was in a different area. So that you never got to integrate with first team players. The first time you meet the first team players is when you get to go there and train. And because you've never been around them or they don't know you and you don't know them, it's a huge, bit of a burden because you go in there never been around them or anything. Where other clubs, and I think Liverpool now, there's more, they're all together. So you see them all the time. You probably eat lunch and breakfast with them. So you're a lot more comfortable if you go and train with them. But in terms of football-wise, I mean, it's the same. It's a huge jump to go and train with them because obviously the quality's better. It's faster, a lot quicker. And it takes, I think, you give yourself a few days, a week, and I think that's all you've got. If you don't adapt to that level and adapt to that pace of play, I think that's where, you probably get sent back to the reserves. But, after a few days, the first day you're thinking, oh my God, the ball's moving so quick and they're playing it into each other at such speed, and it's a shock to you. But to be fair, I adapted quite quick and then started doing well and you just build your confidence step by step. And all of a sudden I was at a point where I was actually looking forward to the training because it's a bit daunting at first. And then I'm starting to do well in the sessions and you're starting to think, wow, I can actually play at this level. I can actually do well in the sessions, and you just grow day by day.
Was there someone that kind of took you under their wing or was like, look, follow me and, made you feel more comfortable around the first team?
I must say, I can't speak bad of anyone in that dressing room, that Liverpool dressing room at that time. No one gave me, no one made it difficult for me. I will say the biggest players were always the most helpful. So Stevie G was great with me. Carragher, Xabi, Alonso at the time, they were all really, really good. And I found out as I got older and more experienced in football, generally the bigger the player or the more famous and the better the player, that they're usually more humble than anyone and they're usually more helpful. You find ones in the middle who are average, who probably have more of a chip on their shoulder than them ones, which is strange, but I've always found that throughout my career.
I've heard a story that with Stevie G or Gerrard, especially when a new player comes in, I don't know if it was more for the youth players coming through or maybe for the big money signings that were coming in from overseas, where pretty much the first training session he'd wrap a ball into their feet to test their touch. And if they're not bringing under control, he'd pretty much just write them off straight away.
Yeah.
Is that true?
I don't remember it happen. I remember everyone firing it in. But obviously, probably him and Alonso were technically probably the best players there. And the pace they used to play their passes at was different to anyone else. And obviously you're expected to handle that. But I did see them write players off after a session, like new signings that had come in, or, if they couldn't handle that sort of thing, I think they, dismissed them quite early. I think it is really brutal in terms of you've got a day or two to really leave an impression on especially them type of players. And I think as a young player, you get a little bit more leeway to give you a little bit more time. But any new signing coming in, yeah, you're under the microscope straight away. Yeah.
Run us through your transfer from Liverpool to Newcastle. So you obviously went out on a couple of loan spells. I think there was 2 loan spells in between. Did it come as a shock that you were going to be moving on at the end of that season?
Do you know what? I wasn't really thinking about it. I mean, I went to Southampton first, who were in the Championship, and did the last 3 months there and played in the playoffs and did well. And then I come back to Liverpool in the pre-season, and Sammy Lee, who was a Liverpool coach, had left Liverpool to take the job at Bolton, and he took me there. They were in Europe, Premier League, and it was a great season for me because I played 25 games as a regular. I played games in Europe against Bayern Munich and Sporting Lisbon. So it was a great learning curve for me. I did well enough to get some interest from other clubs. I wasn't really thinking about my future at that point. I was just thinking about, well, the end of the loan, I'm going to go back to Liverpool. And it was actually the manager pulled me in, Benitez. He just said he'd done really well. They'd kept loads of tabs on me. They'd watch my games. And the next season was going to be difficult for me to play as many games as I did at Bolton, obviously. So he just sort of explained, look, you've gone and done that now. You've took yourself to another level. Next year, you might play 10, 15 games, when there's injuries or cup games. His advice was, once you've got there, it's difficult to come down here and start playing. So for him, he thought if a good offer come in that the club thought was good enough, then they would accept it. And his advice to me was go and play. Plus, he was going to make summer signings in my area of the field. So I was cool with that. I was like, do you know what? Yeah, I spoke to my agent. We had a few offers, and obviously Newcastle come in later in the summer. And I was just going with the flow. And it wasn't until the offer had been accepted and that I got told, right, you have to get up to Newcastle to go and do a medical, etc. I was driving up. I was halfway, and it hit me, and I thought, oh my God, I'm never going to play for Liverpool again. I'm never going to be a Liverpool player because I absolutely love the club. And then it hit me, and I thought, oh, do I want that? Do I want to play for someone else? Do I want to be attached to another club? And I was having second thoughts, and I actually rang my agent. I said, I actually don't know if I want to do this. I've not thought about it really. I'm on the way up because everything in football happens really quick, and he was like, I'm good. So he actually got Stevie G to give me a call, and he said to me, no, go and do it. He said, you need to go and forge your own path, make your own career. And look, if you go and do well, you never know. Liverpool might bite you back in the future, or you'll move on to bigger clubs again. But you need to go and be a Premier League player now. Now you've had a taste of it, and get a good contract and move on. So I took his advice, and yeah, I absolutely loved it. It was a great decision. Obviously, Newcastle's a brilliant club, and I had some fantastic times there.
Is it out of your hands? Like, what if you just turned around and went back to Liverpool and said, Rafa, I'm back? Do they just keep you there, or
that's a possibility? Yeah. If I hadn't gone through with it, I still had 2 or 3 years left at Liverpool, so I could have gone back and fought for my place if that's what I wanted to do. But I think when a club accepts an offer for you, I think they're saying to you, look, we're happy for you to go. So it was just a wobble I had on the way because, like I said, I hadn't considered. I'm not going to be I've been at Liverpool for the best part of 10 years. I'm not going to be a Liverpool football player anymore, and that was a big thing for me.
Of course. And obviously you went on to achieve great things with Newcastle. Liverpool and Newcastle being two of the biggest teams in world football, two of the most intimidating atmospheres. If you had to choose one more ground to play one more professional football match at, which ground would it be?
I'd be at Anfield, being a Liverpool player. I never... and again, it's advice I always give young players or players that are playing is try and savor every moment, because football's always it's so quick that and it's happening. You don't enjoy the moments because you're always thinking about the next one and the next game or the next contract. And I wish I could just I played at Anfield a few times as a Liverpool player, and because you're so focused on the game, you're not really taking in what you're doing, and just to have an opportunity to do that. Obviously, I went and played there as an opposition player, but that's not playing for Liverpool.
That is true, though. You wouldn't be able to soak up, obviously, what you're actually achieving, what you're actually doing, until you probably stopped and be able to actually look back and reflect, because you're right, your mind's so focused on the job, and then after the game's done, you're probably like, okay, that's done. Yeah, especially if you're playing European and the cup competitions, like, all right, we've got a game in 3 days.
Yeah.
That one's done. Let's move on to the next.
Yeah. I mean, and the other thing is
25.
going through the levels and you make your debut, then you play in the Champions League, then you play in the Premier League, you're sort of thinking, oh, this is the norm. Like, oh yeah, you play there, you play there. And next thing, I'll win a trophy, and then I won a trophy at Newcastle quite quickly, and you're like, oh, this is normal. But it's not. You realise you go 4 or 5 years then without doing anything. You're just playing like in a regular season. So that's why I always say any little achievement, anything you win, take a step back and just go, yeah, I enjoyed that. Because like you said, there's game after game. I made my debut, and then, that's the biggest day of my life. But I'm already thinking, do you think I'll be in the squad for the next one in a couple of days? And you don't get. You're in training the next day. You're not even. No one's looking back thinking, "Oh, well done, Danny." They're thinking, right, the next game.
I suppose you play well and have absolute built. You can watch on Match of the Day after. On the highlights, I suppose. I believe you were at Newcastle when Alan Shearer famously came in to obviously help out back in 2009 for a handful of games. I mean, how did the atmosphere change around Newcastle when that happened? And the follow-up question would be like, what's it like as a player when a new manager comes into a team, like, while the season's still ongoing?
Yeah. It's got its pluses and minuses. I think during that, it was a disaster that first season, just because we had 4 or 5 managers that year. And that sort of disruption is very difficult. It's way too many. We had a great squad, and there was something not quite right. We started off poorly, and we were changing. Then in the next couple of months, we were changing. And managers bring their own ideas, their own identities, and they want to make changes. And it's very difficult. And then Alan came in for the last 10 games, maybe, and every manager coming in. So if you're not in the team or you've not been playing, it's brilliant because it's a clean slate and you get an opportunity to impress a new manager where the old one might not have been having you as a player or whatever. But on the other side of that, if you have been playing, then it does cause some concern, because then oh, well, this manager like me, this one coming in now. And while it has a great effect on training, because everyone's really at it, because no one knows if you're playing or you're not playing, who's going to get in, who's not. It does cause some concern around the changing room. Unfortunately, Alan came in with 10 games to go. I think probably the damage was already done. It was going to be, a rescue job, a miracle. And obviously, we got it to the last game and didn't get over the line. But we fully expected him to take the role for the next season in Championship, but it just never happened.
Do you remember the last game, like the feeling of going down?
I do.
How did that feel
I
to
remember
you
it being one of the biggest games of my career, to be fair. And I remember it was obviously Aston Villa away. It was hot. They had a really good team, and when you're in that position, you're clinging on to anything. So it was a nothing game for Aston Villa. So you're thinking, will they take their foot off the gas a little bit? Will they be on holiday? But they weren't. They were at it. They wanted to win. It's their last home game of the season. Maybe if it was at St. James's, it would have made a huge difference. And like I said, at that time under Martin O'Neill, they had a fantastic team, and it was good. It was going to be a big ask. But you were just hoping maybe they were on holiday. Maybe they were, not at it as much. But it was a very difficult game, and I think we just needed a point, maybe, and just a goal, yeah. And we just couldn't get it. We just weren't good enough.
Yeah. Well, you obviously experienced at the top level in the Premier League, but also at Championship level. What would you say the biggest difference is between those two divisions? Because you hear a lot of people saying that, quality-wise, intensity-wise, it's pretty much quite similar.
I would say the Premier League has more quality as a whole. The players are obviously better. There's less changeovers of the ball, so teams keep possession a lot better, and you can be out of possession for a long time. The Championship's more transitional. Teams, you get the ball back quickly, you probably lose it a bit quicker. But I think the biggest difference I've seen in between the two leagues was decision making of the players was a lot better in the Premier League. Very rarely made bad decisions. I think that separates players at all levels, is the decision making. And then probably a ruthlessness. The Premier League was definitely more ruthless, where if you made a mistake or you gifted a chance, it was 9 times out of 10 it's a goal. Championship's probably a bit lower, where you might get away with a mistake, or you might get away with giving a chance away. The Premier League's a lot more ruthless.
Would you say the media presence in the Premier League and does that play a big difference as well, considering how much more global it is?
Yeah, definitely huge. The TV, you're obviously on TV a lot more. There's a lot more coverage, a lot more interviews to do. The Championship, I mean, the Championship for Newcastle felt like Premier League, because we were obviously a huge club going down there. So every game was a big game, and teams coming to St James's was like a final for them. So we still had that with Newcastle, I think, and probably even more pressure, I'd say, because you're probably expected to win every game at that point. And obviously the Newcastle fans are quite demanding as well.
Yeah, it's a bit like that in almost every sport. Obviously, Newcastle being such a large club, it's almost like you're versing the defending champions, where every other team will step up their level to try and match yours. Newcastle going down, these other championship clubs thinking, shit, these guys were in Champions League not too long ago. They would come and match it with you guys. But obviously, did you guys get promoted the next season? Like you guys were down there only for the one?
Yeah,
year,
is
that right?
We were promoted straight away. I mean, the team we kept. I think we only lost 2 players, maybe Michael Owen, Mark Viduka, maybe 2 or 3 players we lost. We were really overpowered for the league, and it was just about us putting it together. I mean, home games, fans were amazing. I mean, we used to get close to 50,000 every week, and it was a big game for the teams coming up. But the home games, we could put teams away really, really quickly, because we just had a fantastic squad. And then the away games were brilliant, because every team would sell out their stadium and away games, and it felt like a big game every week. So it was a brilliant year, and it was a year where probably had the most fun in terms of winning's brilliant. Every time you win, and if you're winning consistently, it's a great feeling. And then the spirit grew, and then as a team, we were really, really close. The Championship is brutal in terms of fixture load. You're playing Saturday, Tuesday every week. So it was a brilliant year, and it was a brilliant year off the field as well. The group was amazing.
You mentioned Mike Viduka. We're obviously from Australia. Most of our following is from Australia. You didn't spend a lot of time with him, but can you tell us a little bit about him?
Yeah, I can. He was brilliant. I loved him. Lovely, lovely man, family man, and he was very, very. He was very different to most footballers, where he was he's big boy, and I wouldn't like to get on the wrong side of him, but he was very, very softly spoken, very polite. He was a fantastic football player, I must say. But he had terrible injury problems the last year he was at Newcastle. And I think, I'll be honest, I think if we'd have kept him fit for a longer period in that season, I think we would have stayed up, or at least had a much better chance. Really top player, but really nice fella as well. He was really good around the dressing room.
Yeah, I think he's living in Croatia at the moment. He's got a cafe there, so
should go cafe now. So he stayed away from football. I suppose he's gone the hospitality route.
Do you know? He used to say to me, because I used to speak to him a lot. He used to say to me, his dream was that he was going to go live in Croatia, just by the sea. He would have a boat. He would go out. He would have a little restaurant or cafe. And he said, nothing to do with football. Football's done for me. It's not finished.
Beautiful. It's good out of his mind or something there. Cool. So you played a couple of years abroad. You spent some time in Indonesia. Yeah. Spent some time in Iceland.
Yeah.
How was the experience playing abroad?
I absolutely loved it, and it was one of my main ambitions to do that, and it was just about when the right opportunity and when the right timing was going to come. I'd done 2 years at Blackburn, and it was very similar to what happened at Newcastle, where we had a lot of changes in the season through managers. Really good squad of players, but I just think with that many changes, it's very difficult to get some continuity. And we unfortunately went down again on the last day of the season, and although I loved working under Tony Mowbray at the time and I had a big role to play, I was 31 and he was offering me a contract, and I'd already started having interest from abroad, from Asia particularly. And I thought, if I sign a 2-year contract at Blackburn, takes me to 33, I'm nearly finished at that point. Would I get an opportunity again to go abroad? So I took the decision to go abroad, Indonesia. To be honest, I knew nothing about the league. I knew nothing about the country. I'd actually agreed to go to other places first, to Thailand and to...
Do you even know where it was?
No. Well, only when I looked at the map. And you know what? I went there with no idea. And obviously I'd agreed terms. The big selling point was my kids would probably stay in Bali for a lot of the time. And I'd heard a lot about Bali. And the first place...
All the good stuff about Bali, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And now I'm a regular visitor to Bali, which is one of my favourite places, full of Aussies. And then I turned up, and it was madness. I remember turning up to the first game I went to was like, I wasn't involved. It was like a pre-season friendly, and they were trying to explain to me how important this pre-season tournament was. And I was like, for me, pre-season had always been, and they were like, no, we've got to win this I was thinking, this is great. I turned up to this ground and there was 50,000, like 2 hours before kickoff in the ground, like flags, flares. And it was a pre-season, like, little tournament for a trophy. And I was thinking, what is going on here? And the more I got, obviously, the longer I spent there and was asking questions, I didn't realise that it is an absolute football nutty place where stadiums are huge, fans fill it. There's 50,000, 60,000. The rivalries are horrendous. There's violence before games, and there's stats like, I think the top 10 most followed teams in the world on Facebook, I think 2 or 3 of them are Indonesian. So it was a huge, huge eye opener for me, and it changed my perception on football in terms of, we live in a bubble in Europe, or especially England, where we think, the Premier League, and, there's a few European leagues that are really good. We don't think anything else outside. We look at America and think, and we look at some of the leagues in Europe. We don't even consider Asia or, the other side of the world. And it made me realise football is massive. It's huge, and we live in this bubble. And I went to Indonesia for a year or so, and honestly, there is absolute superstars out there who are adored. They've got millions and millions of followers. They've been there years. Their social media is huge. They're in the malls, on all the shop windows. I was thinking, what is going on? Like, I've never heard of this guy, and he's got 5 million followers, and he's been here for 5 years, and I walk in and he's all over the shops and that, and I think, my God. So when I advise young players now, and everyone, I just want to go to Europe. I just want to go to Europe. And that's very, very difficult for young players. And I always say, look, there's a pathway there where, I met some Spanish players, fantastic players, Brazilians, and they've been in Asia for the last 10 years, earned really good money, are superstars, are loved and adored. Like, why wouldn't you want a piece of that? Because Europe is great, but it's also very difficult. Like, there's 1% of people that go to Europe and earn a good career. But you can have a look at this market here, but everyone's Europe, and it's it's frightening.
Understandably, even for people in Australia as well, as kids growing up, everyone just wants to play in Europe. Everyone wants to play in the Premier League because it's all in the media, it's all in the TVs. That's all we get to see. But you're right, we're starting to see now these last 5, 10, maybe even 15 years that the growth of football in Asia is providing such a gateway for players to get to Europe,
huge,
to go to Asia.
Absolutely.
And even for coaches as well. Like, you're looking at someone like Ange Postecoglou, who's obviously at Spurs now, who's come through that way as well.
No. I mean, even so, we would play against teams from Malaysia and visit them in Malaysia. And I went to Johor, and Johor's football stadium and training ground is like, it rivals anyone in Europe. Like, their facilities were amazing. They're well funded. Some of the players they've got playing for them, they were fantastic. And like I said, even now as a coach, I travel and coach abroad, etc., because it's so saturated in Europe and particularly in the UK, where a role comes up, there's 100 CVs coming in for it. Where if you've just got a bit more of an open mind, you can go on your travels and circle back at any point. But you can go and, especially with different cultures, different type of players. Like the UAE, I work with Australian players. I work with a lot of African boys. I work with Islamic players. I work with Christians, and you learn how to deal with different people, different players, different cultures coming in, and like I said, it's all about collecting as much knowledge and if I ever want to circle back to Europe, I'll go back with a lot more under my belt.
What about the weather in Indonesia compared to after that you went to Iceland? Because it's not cold enough in England as it is. You went to Iceland. What was that like? It would have been a bit of a shock, bit of a change there.
So when I got back from Indonesia, I actually needed to get my kids in school, and I wanted them to grow up around their family. And I was probably 33, 34 at the time, and I signed for Warsaw because they were like a club next to my house, and I just wanted to enjoy the last few years of my career and travel short distances and be with the kids. So after Warsaw, there was all the COVID stuff, and it was a nightmare for the lower league clubs in England, and then they couldn't pay, and so I sort of left Warsaw by mutual consent. But I'd already started coaching at that point. I was going into the academy. I was taking my licenses. After COVID, I probably was in my mind. I probably retired mentally. I wasn't considering finding another club. I was going to start the coaching. So it had been a few months after COVID, and I was probably looking to see where I was going to go coaching. And I got a random call from an agent who was working with a team in Iceland. There was 3 or 4 months left in their season. They were pushing to win the league. They just wanted to make sure that they'd see the season through and win it. They said to me, come and play. I said at first, no, because A, I'd already retired really, but I hadn't announced. And B, I hadn't played for months. And I hadn't really trained because I was thinking I'm not going to play again. And they were like, no. And so I explained, I was really honest with them and said, I'm not fit. There's no point. It'd take me a while to get fit. I need a full pre-season. And by that time, your season's finished. And they were like, no, come in. You can be a player coach for us, do some sessions, but, join in with the games as well. And I was like, Iceland? I don't know. But do you know what? I went over, and it's one of the most beautiful places, beautiful people. Reykjavik was unreal. It was obviously their summer. They can't play in the winter. They had some lovely days. It was like, there was no night time, so it was 24 hours light, which was strange. The league standard was very good. I played in a very good team. Obviously won the league and definitely finished after that. I thought, yeah, well, if you're going to retire, you might as well retire winning something. But I absolutely loved it. I would go back in a heartbeat to Iceland if the proper role come up for coaching, etc. It's probably a good market as well, Scandinavia. So I absolutely loved it over there, and I had really good experience.
Now, you touched on earlier when you were younger, David Beckham being an idol, had his haircut. I think we all did. I'm sure we had mohawks and all that as well. When you're playing, even throughout your career, I think when you were at Reading, you had some questionable haircuts as well. What was going through your mind at that stage?
I did.
Why the funky haircuts?
I had there was like a charity thing for to raise money because one of the lads at Reading, he was close to I can't remember the boy's name. It's terrible. He actually had cancer and he stopped playing, and we were just trying to raise money, so just tried to do the most outrageous haircut in the world. And I shaved my head off at first. I come back to pre-season with a shaved head, and then I was thinking, there's not a lot I can do here with a shaved head, like to do anything. So I thought, I can't just grow my hair, so I just grow a mohawk for a little bit. And do you know what? Once I started doing it, I started playing really well, and I started scoring all the time with this mohawk. And I thought I was getting dead superstitious, but I think like the charity was over, and I still had it, and everyone was like, what are you doing? Like, we're not raising money anymore with that. And I was like, I know, but I'm on fire and I don't want to shave it off in case, the fire's out after that. But yeah, so I just took that and run with it.
You know, to be fair, I don't think we see enough Mohawks these days. I actually think players should start getting some character back in them and some personality back, and even if it's through their hairstyles.
No,
I think they should
it
bring it
wasn't
back.
it's the mullet at the minute. I went to my son lives in Perth. You see, my 2 kids live in Perth. So my son at the minute, he's like, like this mullet and stuff. And he gets his sight. And then I went to Bali, and all the Aussies there, mate, just the sides done here and this massive thing at the back. And I was thinking, I don't know if that's late in Australia or they're early, and that's going to make it across the world.
I think it's made a loop back. I'm pretty sure it was big back in the 80s or 70s, whatever it was, and now there's some funky new mullet. But it's been around for the last few years now, but I think we're used to it, so we're kind of looking at it like, oh, it's just a normal haircut
It's
now.
normal now.
Just for us. Now, we're coming up to the big question, which we warned you about before we started recording. So to all the listeners, obviously, this is the Coach's Son nomination, so teacher's pet, someone obviously maybe sucked up to the coach a bit, whoever it may be. So, Danny, who's your Coach's Son nomination?
Do you know, I'm going to go for a very good friend of mine, and he's a very good friend because we actually went to the same school, and he came through the Wolves Academy, and I obviously moved on to Liverpool, and we played against each other a few times, and then he actually signed for Blackburn when I was there. So it's a good story because we knew each other from very young, and it's Elliot Bennett, and he had a terrific career, and he was a top professional and a lovely fella. But Paul Lambert had come in at Blackburn, and it was his first signing. But Lambert signed him every club he went, and although he was a good player, I think because he was a little bit busy and a little bit nice. I don't want to say teacher's pet, or he played because he deserved to play, but he played every game under Lambert, and wherever Lambert went, he took him. So there must have been some sort of friendship or something there. But I'm going to say Elliot, but he's a great guy, and he actually retired this year. But it's a nice story when I think about it, that we went to school together and then obviously circled back and ended up playing first team football together. But yeah, when a manager takes you to every club he's at, he's honestly
there's a reason for it.
Yeah, either he's paying him or he loves him. Yeah, one of them.
No, we'll have to get him on the podcast now so he can return serve. So
yeah, get him on.
What he says about him. Absolutely. Perfect. Well, mate, thank you so much for joining. We've had an absolute blast. Really appreciate it. Everyone listening, thank you so much for your patient wait over the break, over the holidays. We'll be back and better again this year with more episodes. Danny, thanks once again for joining the Coach's Son Parks the Bus.
Cheers, fellas.
This was not meant